Welcome to a realm where personal growth meets expansive spirituality and where we're not just scratching the surface. We're diving deep, widening our perspectives, and having a darn good time doing it. This is the Enliven Podcast, and I am your host, Jen Hamilton. You'll enjoy an infusion of motivation, empowerment, and inspiration that will resonate in every aspect of your life. Expect captivating stories, heartfelt musings, and my own personal experiences. But that's not all. I'm bringing awe-inspiring individuals to the table, so get ready to meet some remarkable souls whose wisdom and stories will leave you spellbound. No topic is off limits here. Brace yourself for raw authenticity, unfiltered vulnerability, and yes, the occasional splash of explicit language. We're delving into the realms of the esoteric, mystical, and the woo-woo, unafraid to explore the extraordinary. So if you are ready to venture beyond the surface, to explore the depths of your soul, and to awaken the magic of life, if your heart says yes, then hit that play button and let the Enliven Podcast guide you on this remarkable expedition. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Enliven Podcast. I'm your host, Jen, and my very special guest today is Ashley Winning. Ashley is a homebirth mindset coach and guide, a podcaster, speaker, and she birthed her third baby at home unassisted after 2 surgical births. Ashley believes that women are born with the strength, wisdom, and courage to birth and to be the mothers they want to be. She works intimately with pregnant women who plan to home birth or free birth by working through fear and mindset challenges while providing emotional support so that they feel heard, seen, and validated while taking the steps to intuitively birth their baby their way. Ashley's story is so inspiring. So if you're a mother or you're looking to give birth at some stage, this is the episode for you. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Ashley, and welcome to the Enliven Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. I'm really good because I'm out of the heat at the moment with the aircon. It's super hot as we live in the same state, being summer here. Really good, though. Had a couple cups of coffee to keep me going.
That's the way, isn't it? I had my cacao this morning. I don't have aircon on, so I've just got the beautiful fresh breeze that nature provides. I'm so excited to dive into this conversation with you today because you do some really incredible things in this world. You're a homebirth mindset guide. Can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, your journey to home birth and what brought you into this line of work?
Yeah, sure. So with my first baby, I went to the GP when I was planning a pregnancy and wanted to make sure that everything was on track for my health and that sort of thing. I'm always planning ahead. I'm a future planner. I'm always trying to control things. And so I want to make sure everything's lined up. There's no way that you'd find me pregnant without me putting myself in that situation because I'm just so want to control everything. So I went there, tried to learn as much as I could, but the GP said, look, the only thing I'd say is, lose some weight because it might cause some issues getting pregnant. And I thought, okay, well, about to get married, couldn't lose it for the wedding, been trying my whole life. So off we go. Got pregnant straight away. Essentially, I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes. They lowered the rates when I had my first baby in 2014. Where I was working in the city, I didn't have it. And then where I was actually birthing at the hospital, I did have it. And what that meant was that I had to be stuck with obstetric care. And so I thought that was really great for me. I'm getting obstetric care in the public system. This is amazing. They're the top people of birth. But what I didn't actually understand is that it was cold and clinical, and that if I wanted to have a vaginal birth, which is how I wanted to birth, that I needed to probably be with the experts of vaginal birth, which is midwives. And if I wanted to have a surgical birth, then I was probably in safe hands with obstetricians. So I blindly went through that path because I had been raised through society and everything that they are the experts and to respect authority. And so even though I had this feeling intuitively that this is not right, this is not celebrated, this is cold, clinical, I thought that it would be a magical, exciting journey being the first baby, I thought, doctors are painted as these lovely humans that are here to care for people. But what I didn't realize was that I was seeing a lot of junior doctors who were rotating through, just doing their clinical hours. I was just another one of the 100 people they were seeing that week. And I was missing a lot of information as to how the system actually works, the insurances, the staff rotations, the fact that the hospital's an institution that has to protect itself before women and babies. And I went down the road of being told what to do, which was, for me, was you're having an induction. And that was exciting because I was meeting my baby 2 weeks early. I could not believe it. I was on a winning streak here. I even met another mother who said to me, "Don't worry, I got induced and had my baby within 4 hours. So I'm going to have this baby like within 5 hours or something," I'm thinking. I was really naive, and I just thought C-sections were women who really were going to have troubles, or women who wanted to have them. And no woman in my bloodline had ever had a C-section. So there was no evidence to me that I would need it. None of my friends had C-sections. All of my friends had had babies early, around about 18, 19. But I was in a new era of I noticed that it changes really quickly in the system as well. And things go in waves. Like, since I had my third baby, there's a huge shift in things. And back then there was a lot of intervention for induction. There still is a lot of intervention for induction. It's, I think, 60% of first time mums are having inductions, rather than just allowing the spontaneous process to happen that we've been doing for thousands of years without needing to have it happen. And I went through that induction process, and the induction failed. And so my beautiful body rejected all of the medicines that they used to try to open my cervix, to ripen my cervix. My cervix was, "No, I'm not coming to play. I'm protecting this baby. We're keeping this baby in." At the time, I didn't look at it that way, of course. I saw that as a failure on my body's behalf, and it was a very painful process. They put their hands into your vagina, up into your cervix, and put gels into there. There's a lot of monitoring. You're stuck on your back, heavily pregnant. Your partner and you are stuck in this room for days on end, just waiting for this baby to come. It's very boring and very tiring because people are coming to check and monitor you throughout the night, so you don't get much sleep. And then if that doesn't work with the gels, they then put you through a process of putting a balloon into your cervix, which opens up slowly and forces your cervix open. It was the most excruciating pain that I'd ever felt. And the doctor, I call him Dr. Nick from The Simpsons because he was so blasé. Do you know that scientist on The Simpsons show is like, "Hello, I'm Dr. Nick.
Yes, yes.
We're going to see what happens." That's who he was like. And they looked at me as if I was a hypochondriac, as if I was the only woman on earth who had ever had pain from having something like this shoved into me. I was put on gas, and I thought, if I can't handle this, how can I handle birthing a baby?
Mm.
And that process went overnight. And so it's supposed to force your cervix open and help it dilate. And then they would go through some other processes. I didn't actually get stepped through this process. I wasn't informed of the process. Every time I asked about birth through my pregnancy, they just said, "Oh, we'll talk about it another time." And there were jokes made, and it was just very blasé. There was no education or information provided. And there was nobody ever said to me that this could actually fail as well, or that you're not actually favorable for this procedure, and actually show you a pathway of what would happen if you go down that pathway. And so that pathway, for anyone listening, is the quick pathway to a C-section birth for many women. Otherwise, it's a very quick pathway to a medicalized intervention-based birth of all of the things happening. It's what I would say is one of the most painful ways to birth a baby. When you think about forcing something to happen or allowing the natural process to happen, it's kind of like making a baby is the easiest way versus having IVF, which, if we've heard women's stories of IVF, that can be a very painful process, very painful. So it's kind of a bit like that in my mind. So 5 a.m. in the morning, they bust through the doors. It's not working. It hasn't worked. It hasn't fallen out. So we want you to come back in a couple of days and we're going to start this process again. Actually, won't you come back tomorrow for more monitoring? I'm going to start it again on Monday. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it hasn't worked. Why don't I just come back when I'm in spontaneous labor? And they said, no, you can't do that. And we're going to go for a meeting with the obstetricians. Like, we're going to have an obstetrician meeting. We'll come back and let you know. And they recommended that I had a C-section because I said, there's no way I'm coming in for a C-section. I just am not brave enough for that. I don't want to do that. So I think they kind of saw me as a bit of a flight risk and thought, well, she's going to have a C-section anyway. So let's just get her in the door for a C-section and get that one done. So I went through with that and I said, okay, fine. My husband only had a week off. So by that time he had used half of his annual leave. We had my mother and father-in-law at home babysitting our dog. She was our first baby, our little fur baby. And off I went. It was a very scary experience, a very surreal, very out of body, cold clinical. I've never had drugs like that before. I've never had surgery before. So I didn't feel very connected to the experience and I just wanted to pass out because it was a shock to my body and my system and I'd not had sleep for multiple days. And basically that started me off on my journey as to how I am here. I've just wanted to spread the message of my experiences so no other woman was robbed of her choices, that she can make informed choices for herself and that she can make choices that she feels is right. There's nothing worse than people not giving you true choices and being able to make an informed consent.
My gosh, you and I have such similar stories because with my first, I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes as well. And it was on the lower side. I can't even remember what the number range was back then, but I refused to go on metformin. So I chose to be diet controlled. And I was like pinpricking every day, I think 3 or 4 times a day and keeping a record of it. And as I got through the pregnancy, like I would go to the obstetrician and she'd say, oh, she'd have a look at my book at my appointment. She's like, oh, you had a spike here. I'm like, yeah, I was really stressed at work. And it like, even though I was making the connections with stress, it was basically like, no, it must be something you're eating. They didn't even take into consideration, first of all, my feelings. Second of all, the pressure that I was under. At the time, I was actually working for a very well-known women's activewear brand, which I will not mention here. But they give they had always marketed around the fact that they're all for women and women's empowerment and stuff, and it was very, very far from that behind closed doors. There was a lot of pressure in the head office that I was working at here in Brisbane, and then I'd go and see the obstetrician and it was all sort of food. But then I was seeing, a diabetic educator who said, because I'd built up an addiction to Nutella in my pregnancy. And she was basically saying, like, if you just lift weights above your head, you're going to burn the most calories to get that sugar level down within, the time between when you have Nutella and, when you're pinpricking your finger. Like it was so, I'm sorry, but it was fucked up. Like it was fucked up. And I had no clue. Like this is going back almost 10 years ago since I fell pregnant.
Yeah.
And so I went, I went full medical the first time as well. So I had an obstetrician, and it was so clinical and it was so, by the book, and it was so sterile. And it had I known any different, like what I know now, like obviously hindsight's amazing, but I didn't know any different at the time. And it wasn't until I'd gone through such a traumatic time going through an induction, because the induction came because I'd had a sugar spike, which even to this day, I still think to myself, I wonder what would have happened if I just hadn't have told her that I'd had this small sugar spike, because she's like, right, we've got to get baby out. And my body wasn't ready. She wasn't ready. And I trust divine timing. I trust, the exact time and place that, a child comes into this earth. I fully surrender to that. And had I known then what I, found out, obviously, as my journey went on, through motherhood and connecting with other women, I certainly wouldn't have journeyed down that path. And I think it's so important to bring light to these things, not to scare people off to go down that medical path or to have obstetricians, but also to know that they have choices. to
Mm.
know that there are options, and it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to say no, because essentially, like, there's no education around childbirth or pregnancy, in the depths that we need it. Yet we hand everything over to these doctors that, become like gods to us. We take their word as gospel to be
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, so they say that I might need a cesarean. This is what I better do. Like, all we can think about is, our own survival, and then the survival of our babies. So we find the people that we can put our trust in, and as through your own personal experience as well, Ashley, that's not always the case, that it's not always at the best interest of ourselves and our babies.
Yeah, exactly. And I think almost a day doesn't go by where somebody doesn't say that to me. Like, oh, I had a cesarean because I was told that was my only choice, or I had an induction. And if I knew, I would have, it's just, there's so many women because such a huge portion of us are going through the same. I liken it as a sausage factory. So if you think of a sausage factory, you've got, this is how we treat the pork sausages. You go down this conveyor belt. This is how you treat the chicken sausages. But then if you have a special kind of sausage come in, you got to mix it up with all the love and all the information and all of the goodness, then the whole factory stops, the conveyor belt stops, and then there's all these people lined up, or sausages, lined up. That's not how the system works. We need to spit these women out as quickly as possible. We don't have time to think. We don't have time to do individualized care. We only have time to put you in the right section. So you're this size, you're this color, you're this weight, you're this blah, blah, blah. You go down there, and this is how we kind of roll. And so the more that we can understand how the system's working, the more that we can use that to our advantage and make choices that are actually right for us. We can ask the right questions. We can actually say, is this a staffing issue, or is this actually a me and baby issue? And if they answer it's a staffing issue, you can say, okay, well, what are my other alternatives, and what are my other choices available to me?
Yeah, and I think for so long, women haven't, first of all, had the knowledge and understanding about, what their choices are and what their rights are, and to go against the grain as well, like to go
Mm,
against, certain doctors' orders. Like, I fought tooth and nail to not go on metformin, because at the time it was a class C drug, and I was doing my research. I'm like, I don't actually know what the effects are of this during pregnancy, and being really, really mindful, because
mm,
in my family there was the use of what was that drug back in like the 60s and 70s for morning sickness, um thalidomide. And so that was a drug that was used for women with morning sickness, and there was a lot of birth defects from it because it just wasn't studied enough.
mm,
And these poor babies were coming out completely deformed, or having all these sorts of health issues. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't know what metformin can do to me or my baby, so I'm
yeah,
not prepared to go on it. I'll do everything that I can. And then even when the baby came, I then had to go up against at the time, with based on what I knew, I vaccinated the children. I don't think I did some of them. I was like, this is brand new, and this is not okay. Like, why are we giving I can't remember which one it was, but it might have been like a hepatitis shot or something. I'm like, why are we doing that to babies? And like, there was the backlash for that. And then as they got older, and I started seeing like the child health nurse, it's like, you should be putting them on milk. And
mm,
I'm like, but I'm not, I'm breastfeeding. Like, oh, solids at
mm,
4 months, solids at 6 months. It's like the whole journey, unless you feel empowered, unless you are educated, unless you, I guess, have the strength to be able to go, no, actually, we're doing it our own way. You just kind of
yeah,
fall into that system, don't you? Because we don't know any other way. And who do we look to? We look to our mothers, and majority of them fell into the system, or our aunties or our sisters or our cousins or our girlfriends. We look to the women around us. And if all of the women around us have been exposed to essentially this collective mentality of how women birth these days, which is very different from how it used to be. Like, Ashley, where the fuck did it go wrong? Like, where did the wheels fall off the cart of birthing and motherhood?
I would say when men came into birth. Like, what do
Mm-hmm.
men know about birth? Let's be honest. They don't birth. They don't have vaginas. They don't know what it feels like. And so there was an uprise of obstetricians or doctors, and they started playing around with women's bodies. They actually started playing around with coloured women's bodies and actually testing medicines to see what would happen. You know, is this going to be painful or not? Then they started testing on us, and the surgeries and things that they did in the hospitals, they weren't sterile. They didn't know what they were doing. But men, a lot of the time, you know, you just think of somebody with a lot of confidence, the middle-aged white man, Steve, who has a lot of confidence and wouldn't think twice about saying, yep, I'm up to it, I'll give it a shot. And they were more than happy to take over from midwives who had been attending at home for the forever. And I'm not saying, and I know that one of the biggest objections that I hear from people is, why would I home birth when women died in those days? And the reason why women died is because they didn't have access to sterile environments. They didn't have access to blood transfusions. They didn't have access to antibiotics. We all have access here. We're very lucky in Australia, at least. We have access to those things, and we see those as basic things now. So we don't need to have women going into hospitals, which is an environment where people go with diseases and for, you know, who are dying, who've got really bad diseases. And we saw that happen in COVID. Women started to refuse to go to hospital, especially second and third time mums. They said, well, I've actually done this before, so what's another alternative for me? My husband or my partner can't come in because they're not getting vaccinated, so I think we'll just stay home. And so there was this huge shift from women choosing to hospital birth and actually looking at alternatives on where we could actually birth. And so I think birth centres would be a good step that are not attached to hospitals. Women seeing midwives in community centres, so we don't have to travel into hospital and wait for hours at a time. Women seeing women, women passing on the information, and women allowing the process to happen. And what's happening in the system is now the insurance companies are the ones that are kind of riding on what actually happens, because the doctors are actually under the thumb of the insurance companies if they get sued, because they're worried first and foremost about their career and what could happen. And I don't blame them, because if I was in their situation, I had everything to lose because somebody sued me and the insurance company tapped on my shoulder and said, look, mate, you're not going to get anything done if you put this woman in a C-section. I would be doing them as well, because you got to protect yourself. And so it's really interesting when you look at the culture and you look and see the reason why these choices are being made, why things are happening the way that they're happening. Now, with my second baby, I ended up fighting and advocating, like you said. I was a nervous Nelly. I was anxiety driven. I was crying on the way to hospital. I was, oh my goodness, I've got to raise my voice. Like, not raise my voice, but I've got to use my voice against authorities and people who are like experts, and who am I? And so I had to work through all of that. I advocated and I advocated and I advocated for a spontaneous birth, for a VBAC. And at 37 weeks, nothing had changed throughout my care. They realized they couldn't bully me anymore, and I got kicked out of hospital at 37 weeks. And they said, look, we're not willing to take on your care. We've waited to 37 weeks to do this, by the way. You can choose from this hospital or this hospital. So then I had to choose. First of all, I was so afraid at this point. Like, where am I going to go? I never knew home birth was an option. I didn't know much about it. And so I chose another hospital, but you've got no continuity of care, which is the gold standard of care. Not that I was getting continuity of care at this public hospital anyways. You usually have to go a private option, like a private midwife or something. And then I went through and then I finally had my spontaneous birth. But as soon as I went into the hospital, the surgeon took one look at me and decided, because I'm a bigger person, I'm incapable, I'm lazy, I'm unable to birth my baby vaginally, we may as well just get her into a surgery. And before long, they were able to push me into a surgery through basically like every hour, like nothing's happening, this is going on, blah, blah, blah. There was nothing actually happening with me or my baby. It was just that they had decided this is the pathway for you. And I ended up going into that surgery, and the things that they were warning me about actually happened in the surgery, which meant they tore my womb in the surgery. So they said to me, the longer we wait to do the surgery, the higher risk it is for you. And I kept putting it off, because I'm just like, well, I'm just going to have this baby vaginally, right? Like, why am I going to surgery? And so eventually, after a while, they were checking me every hour, and I said, okay, fine, I'll just I'll just go do that sort of route. We'd had a couple of baby D cells that didn't recover as quickly. I started to getting really fearful about the whole thing. And I came out of that totally traumatized with PTSD. I had 3 liters blood loss. I thought I was going to die. It was the most traumatic experience.
Mm.
And then as I started to realize what had happened, and I did a birth debrief with an obstetrician at the hospital, and I found out that I'd been treated that way purely because of my size and that they'd decided for me what was going to happen. All of the advocating and fighting I'd done, which I never needed to do any of it, by the way. Like if I was going to go birth in the hospital now, I would just say, this is what I'm doing. I'm not going to talk about it. You're going to respect me. We've had this conversation. I'm an adult. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. But for me now, I've had my free birth experience at home. Why am I going to go in there in the first place?
Exactly.
To
Yeah.
have those sorts of conversations. Why do you need to be treated like a child? If somebody tells you one thing, you're an adult. Like, that's the end of the conversation. I've told you these are your risks. We're going to write it down, and that's it. We're not going to fearmonger you. We're not going to pressure you. We're not going to scare you to do what we want to do. We're going to respect you and support you to have the safest birth you possibly can. And that's not the experience for many of the women that I work with, at least.
Gosh. And you hear about it so much, don't you? Like I've connected with
Yeah.
so many women, and I know women that have free birth, that have home birth, that have gone through, the hospital experience, like the full spectrum, basically. Um, and every single time I have heard someone going through the hospital experience, they've had a somewhat negative experience, or they've been steamrolled
Mm,
into something, or there's been missing information, or they've felt like they couldn't stand up and use their voice. And I am such an
mm,
advocate for women's empowerment. Like I get really loud and passionate about this. Anything to do with I guess the wounds that we've got like deep seated within us around what the
yeah.
patriarchy has done to women, I get really fucking loud about that. um and and this is the thing, like we need people standing up and saying, actually, this is what I'm going to do. Like, give me the information, sure,
Mm,
but I'm going to make an informed choice based on the information that I have, based on other support that I can get from elsewhere, like midwives. When I
mm,
when I had my son, I ended up going through a midwife program. I ended up canceling. It was the best thing I did. I canceled my private healthcare insurance with pregnancy,
mm,
because I'm like, I don't want to go down that path again. I had a pretty traumatic experience. And
mm.
going through the midwife program, it was completely different. Like I felt so at ease. I felt so nurtured and cared for. And it's like, oh no, we don't worry about that stuff that they do, that they worry about so much at the hospital, and how they interrogate you.
Mm,
And I was like, but what if I get diabetes again? They're like, but maybe you won't as well. And I didn't the second time. Yet,
yeah.
I was told over and over again that, I'm at risk because I've had it the first time. You're likely to get it the second time. It's likely this and it's like that. They're all about, they love their statistics. I mean, look, doctors are amazing. Yes, 100% time and a place for medicine. Absolutely.
Mm,
Yet, doctors in the medical field are glorified drug dealers. That's
yeah.
what they do. They
Yeah.
they they are pharmaceutical representatives. They can write out scripts
Yeah.
for pharmaceuticals. They are not healthcare. And one of the things that I'm so passionate about is helping people understand that the word health actually has nothing to do with pharmaceuticals. Yet we're so warped in our society. I mean, look, that's a completely separate conversation in itself,
Yeah.
isn't it?
And look at how they're treated in the health system. They're working 12-hour shifts. They're having a few hours break, coming back. They are not looking after themselves, and they're in a position supposed to be giving us health advice or looking after us, but they don't know how to look after themselves. They don't even treat their own people well, and
Mhm.
they're burning them out at a faster rate. But you're absolutely right. And the drugs that they use during birth are all mimicked off of our natural hormones anyways. So what do you want? A synthetic version, a fake version, or your natural version that's going to happen without you having to think about it? They have to think, okay, this has been disrupted. We've stopped this process happening. We're going to give this drug to boost this, to make this happen, to do that. Or you just allow the process to happen, and your body, your magical body that created the baby. I mean, when you think about it, you've created a whole human being, the brain, the lips, the body, the skin. We don't know how it happens, right? None of us, we don't know how it happens, but it happens. And then when it comes to birth, that's just ejecting that baby out. That's the easy part. You've just created a whole life. Now you're flushing out the baby. But the body has all the information inside. We might not know intellectually what's happening, but our bodies do
Mm.
intuitively know what's happening. And so I'm a strong believer in physiological birth and intuitive birth. And that's how I birthed my third baby at home. I didn't know all the things that were happening, but I trusted in my body, and that birth will 90% of the time go right. For 10% of women, they will need medical assistance. And most of us are very fortunate that we're near a hospital. We have access to ambulances, or we can get to the hospital. If you've got a midwife with you at home, you've got access to a medical personnel there who's supportive usually, and very hands off of the process, but she's got all the medical equipment there if it's needed as well.
Mm. Yes, and I'd love to hear about your home birthing experience. Tell us about how that went down, especially after what you experienced with your first two, and then I guess like transitioning into this whole different experience. What was that like for you? Tell us about the journey.
Well, I didn't have to fight anyone through the pregnancy, so that was a really calming experience. I had a woman, a mama who's pregnant, and she just messaged me this morning and said to me, I'm 12 weeks pregnant and I've decided to free birth because of your story, and it's opened my eyes. I haven't seen anyone, and it's just so calm and relaxing. And it's like, well, it is, because you've got nobody telling you you can't do this, you can't do that. I was pregnant in COVID times in 2020, so I was able to access telehealth from the local GP, and then I could just drive down the road and go get a ultrasound, you know, referral or something like that, or pathology, something from go get my bloods done. So I was able to pick and choose. You probably couldn't get away with it now, but I was very lucky in that time that I could just call up some random doctor, and he was so busy or rushed that he was more than happy to leave it for me. So I was able to get all the support through that process that I needed to get. So I had ultrasounds done that I wanted to have done to make sure certain things were happening. And I got bloods. I wanted to make sure my iron was okay. I think there's a misconception about free birthers or people who are home birth thinking that we don't use medical. We're against medical systems. Absolutely not. I mean, every single day we walk around as we are, we don't have to go visit the hospital just in case. We don't have to go see the doctor just in case, but we will go to the doctor when we need support, right? We will go to the hospital if we need support. And birth isn't a medical an emergency for a majority of women, but it's the support's there if you need it, you know. So it was a very calming experience. I had birth doulas attend my birth as well. I went into my waters broke about 4 a.m. I went into spontaneous labor. It was the first time that my waters had broken in that birth before labor had started, and it was really painful. I'm not going to lie. And I tell this to people because I think in home birth, we see these beautiful videos and we see the music and the woman birthing, and I consider my birth to be very calm and peaceful, but the first 4 hours were very painful. It was me realigning my energy, trying to I'd just been sleeping, and then all of a sudden I was like, half an hour, I was like adrenaline spiking through my body. I was excited. I was nervous. My body was shaking from the adrenaline. I was in extreme pain. So it's a huge shock for your body to kind of get into that mode. I think if you get the contraction starting like the first thing, it gets you to ease into that experience. That's what I experienced with my second. So we got my daughters out of the house because they were so cute, bless them. But their energy was like, Mummy's having the baby, and they were rubbing my arm like, Mummy, you can do this. Just breathe in and breathe out, because I'd trained them, and they'd seen a lot of birth videos, getting them prepared for what's to come. But their energy, I read people's energies. And so for me, I just needed grounding and calmness. My husband got everything organized, the birth pool. So while that was getting done, I just couldn't get myself into a comfortable position. I was on the birth pool. The birth pool, the toilet, my bed, I was groaning, I was moaning, I had my comb. And eventually, as soon as I could get in that birth pool, which was probably a few hours in, I started to be able to calm my energy down. I had my birth doula I could hold her hand. I could talk to her and, is this normal? Is this okay? You know, just get that reassurance and that love and support. I had my affirmations on my wall so I could look at them and keep me calm. My husband put the music on, the diffuser. And about 4 hours in, I consider it to be basically calm. I still had the contractions happening, but every third or fourth contraction, there was a pushing contraction. And so I had a posterior baby, which I expected would be the case. And one thing that a lot of people don't know, because we hear a lot about textbook births, 10 centimeters, push, push, push.
Mm.
In a posterior baby, you know, I was fully dilated within the first 4 hours, which was the most pain. And then basically it was all about pushing the baby down and around to get her to rotate in the best position. So I had about 10 hours of my body working extremely hard to push the baby down, but I had no time restrictions. I was in my birthing pool. I was relaxed. I was chill. I was warm in the pool. They were making it warm, you know, filling it up. I was laughing in between contractions. My legs started to ache a little bit. It started to go numb, and I was joking about chopping it off because that was really annoying. But it was basically my nerves in my back. The baby's head was squashing the nerves and cut off the circulation a bit to my legs, so it went numb. I didn't know any of this before. And then eventually I felt this huge, because every contraction was kind of pushing out a poo. I felt this huge poo kind of coming down. I was like, oh my goodness, but it felt so satisfying every pushing contraction. So I'd go from laying backwards, relaxing, to getting on my knees and laying over the birth pool, and powerful push, all involuntary. It just all happens the way it needs to. And it was the baby's head coming down, of course, you know, the size of a head. And then I felt something inside, and I thought, oh, I think there's something there. And I said to my husband, can you just put your fingers in and see what's there? And he's like, feels like a kiwi fruit. And I was like, okay, all right. And he goes, well, it could be a mussel, because what would he know, right? He's got no experience. A kiwi fruit, of course, that's the baby's head. And I thought, oh my goodness, what if I've prolapsed? And I was like, oh, well, we'll just have to ride the process. And before we knew it, the baby's head was there, and it was coming in and out, coming in and out. And the doulas had left us. We'd had some privacy, and eventually they came in and were observing. And then the baby's head came out, and I think she came to about her shoulders. And this is where my birth did become disturbed. And this is where I like to share this part with people, because especially as somebody who takes on other people's energy, this is how quickly a birth can become disturbed and things can actually change. So my birth doula came in and said, don't touch the baby, move away from the baby, to my husband. So everything that I had seen and everything that I knew about birth was that you're allowed to touch your baby's head. You're allowed to, you know, touch and do those things. What I suspect happened was that my doula had some trauma that she'd brought in, and we'd had many conversations about trauma, energies. I don't want you to, you know, suggest anything or coach anything. But at that point, baby was kind of stuck at the waist, and then there was no more contractions because the birth had been disturbed. So I was purple pushing, and my husband said it was probably about a minute. It felt a lot longer to me, but it was just, I was like, can you pull the baby out? And he didn't want to touch the baby, but eventually I just pushed her out quickly. And then she came onto my chest, and then we got to meet and see that she was a beautiful baby girl. And my husband was the first to catch her and touch her, and he says that it was a different experience, like a healing experience for him, because he got to be part of it, and he had a really special bond with that baby, because I think it's because he got to be so part of the journey and actually get to cut the cord and grab her and find out what she was. It
Wow.
was,
What an experience. Like, was it healing for you to go through that journey, considering, you know, everything you'd been through, Ashley, in those first two births, and like so much intervention and so much, you know, being told what to do and how to do it. And obviously, you know, caesarean surgery as well. What was that like for you?
I felt really whole after the experience because there's nothing, you can't really describe how it feels to have a cesarean section, but there's a big cut across your stomach. So being able to sit up and all those sorts of things is very painful and awkward for a while. So I felt really whole. I didn't have major surgery on my belly. I didn't have any tearing. I had a 10-pound baby and no tearing.
Wow.
So there's a lot of talk about big babies and the issues. I'm only 5'1", so I'm a bigger person. I've got a lot of excess fat on my body, but my skeleton system is a 5'1" person. And so my nanny in the 60s was birthing 9 and 10-pound babies because my granddad's quite big. And my mother-in-law was giving birth to 4 kilo plus babies in the 80s. And it's like, this isn't a new thing. Women have been birthing bigger babies.
Mm.
And a portion of women, I think it's a very low percentage, will have, let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the 90 whatever percent that are having easygoing, no problems,
Mm.
And I was really worried about tearing because when you're choosing to not have surgery and you've had that, you know what that's like. You know how the healing process is going to be. But then the fear is, well, what's going to happen to my vagina?
Mm.
Is it going to like completely tear open? Am I going to have like this horrible experience?
Mm.
And so I just felt completely whole after the experience. And I felt like something that was taken from me was returned to me.
Mm.
And there's nothing, it's really hard to explain. Obstetricians, I've heard some make comments like you'll never remember or you'll forget the trauma or the hardship. And my daughter's 9 now, so you never forget. Like, I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. And it's going to be a story that circulates. I've got 3 daughters. That's a story for them to carry on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? I still have trauma from some of the things that my obstetrician said, and even what a gynecological physio said after I had my son. So the second time around, like I just like there's still so much. It's a lot of process. I've done a lot of processing and done a lot of healing, and I love the way my body has been able to go through this healing journey as well. Because at the time you think, oh my god, it's never going to heal, it's never going to bounce
Yeah.
back, and all you hear these horror stories, or you get told by doctors and all this kind of stuff. And it really does come back down to listening to your body, and going through that process of that absolute trust in your body, especially as women. Like, we are literally designed, we are put here on this earth to give birth to bebes. That's what
Yeah.
our bodies are designed for, and we've been doing it for like literally thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Why do we think in the 20th century that we have to go and rewrite how we do it, because the obstetrician's going on his yearly holiday to Paris and has to get the baby out by a C-section before he goes, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's they've got a kid, like one of their kids has got something happening at school. So it's not, doesn't even have to be as extravagant or exciting. It could just be them having a barbecue that afternoon with friends. That's the sad part about it. And I understand from a logistical point of view, but this is a life experience. This is
Yeah.
a life, like, why would you have major surgery, or why would you have these interventions? Just so that this person can go have a barbecue
Yeah, right.
or whatever. It's like, if someone sat down and said that to anyone in their logical mind, nobody would accept that. Why are we accepting that? I know that they're not saying that to us. That's one of the biggest problems.
Mm-hmm.
But if all the women understood the reasons why we were being told these things, perhaps we would have a bit more fight back in us. And if we understood how birth worked, and we actually understood, rather than getting like, I'd be pretty frightened if someone said to me, every time I got in my car, you've got a 50% chance of having a car accident. I'd be shitting myself. Like, every time I got in the car,
Right.
if you walk across the road, you've got a blah, blah. I mean, that would put you on edge, but that's the whole purpose of them saying that.
Mm-hmm.
And they use the statistics. The statistics are actually in our favor, but it's the way that they word it. It's oh, well, you've got a 99%, or what, you've got a double risk, and it might be 0.10%. You've got a 0.2% like 0.2%. The risk is double, but the risk is not even worth talking about. It's
Yes,
ridiculous.
it's still so minimal. And this is the thing, like, this is where, as women, as a society, we do need to wake the fuck up. And I say that lovingly
Yeah.
because I don't want to shake anybody awake with fear. I want to be there to
Mm,
sit beside someone as they're awakening and, through having these conversations. But like, I truly feel that we go through these situations so that we can empower our daughters to have a
yeah.
different experience when they come to birth and, when they're ushering in, a new wave of children, a new generation for this, the great awakening, let's call it, that they're feeling empowered and that we had to go through this experience, like our mothers had to go through and experience things to
Mm,
teach us things that we're now like roaring really loudly to create change around in our generation. I feel like that is human evolution within itself,
mm,
um but we have to roar. Like, sometimes our voices cannot be heard unless we get loud, and it's not because we just want to fuck shit up. It's because we know innately the power of our bodies. We know how strong we are as women. We know how to birth, but we've been so pushed down. We've been made to feel less than or worthless or like we can't do something, or based on these ridiculous statistics that, that we're not going to be able to get through it. It's like, fucking try me, mate,
yeah. Mm,
and I think it's so important to feel empowered. And this is why I love having these types of conversations, because for anyone listening to this, and it might not be around birth, it could be any area of your life. Like, dig deep to find that empowerment. And if you need the support, go out and get the support, from someone like Ashley in the birthing space. Or,
mm,
I support so many women through my coaching work to be able to have a voice to advocate for what they do want, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in their relationships, whether it's in their business,
mm.
whether it's as a mother, in all these different areas. We have to be able to, dig deep to find our voice and bring that forward, because, at the end of the day, we are whole and complete sovereign beings. And, we have a voice for a reason. This is our journey of life. We're not here to live someone else's experience. We are main character in our own life.
Yeah. And there is a journey that you need to go on, especially for the people pleasers like myself, or recovering people pleaser, I should say, or highly sensitive people like myself. You're so worried about judgments and offending someone and all of those sorts of things. And I realize the more that I actually am true to myself, the more that I'm actually able to speak for myself and understand what it is that I want to say, the less that I'm actually hurting anyone. Like, I'm not actually hurting anyone by me saying what it is that I want, or by using boundaries or using my voice. You don't have to be disrespectful or rude to people. It's really about aligning yourself to the path that you want to go on to. And I found that I've gone from this person who I always was inquisitive. I've always been curious. I always ask questions, but now I know my no. And now I know what I want. And so we homeschool. I've gone from public hospital system to free birthing, which I never thought that was never thought, to we homeschool. Like, I unschool my children at home, and it's just, the world is my oyster. I can literally do whatever I want because I'm choosing and I'm dictating. I work from home, just like you work from home. We have that flexibility, and so you can choose the life that you want to have, and you can choose the birth that you want to have. You can, you can't control every aspect of things, but you can put motions into play and go down that path that you want to go down.
100%. And this is what happens on the awakening journey, as you would have
Mm,
discovered going through this yourself, Ashley, is that when you start awakening and you start to realize the systems that we are born into and that we're matrixed into, is that it's duplicatable across all different systems. Like, when you start to look at we'll call it the healthcare system. I like to call it just the pharmaceutical system. When you look
yeah,
at that area, especially when it comes to having children, so you look at it in the space of birth, then you go, okay, well, the next part of the journey, essentially, as the child grows older, is the education system. Then you start putting a spotlight on the education system. You're like, hang on a second, this doesn't align with my values. I'm
yeah,
not going to put my children through this particular system, because either
mm,
of an experience that happened to me, or what I am seeing, or like some of the stuff that I see in mainstream education, I'm absolutely freaking appalled by,
Yeah.
that happens in these schools, or that, the what teachers go through. And I mean, that's a separate conversation within itself as well, but then you start to look at all these other systems. So then you start to look at the financial systems that we're conditioned by. We are born into these systems and all of these conditions, which, for so long we've just existed in, and our parents didn't know any different, and their parents didn't know any difference. And at the end of the day, it all came down to survival. And I think now, through this awakening process where people are starting to go, hang on a second, and then we're starting to use our voice, and we've got these magical things now called the internet and podcasting
Mm,
platforms and social media, where we can be having these conversations and sharing the information for people to be able to then awaken and make their own informed decisions as well. Like, there might be people that listen to this and go, fuck that, I'm going straight to a hospital. There's no chance that I could free birth, and that's fine. But make the informed decision based on what it is that you value, what it is that you do want, the education that you do have, and the knowledge that you do have around this topic. The same as when it comes time to putting children through the education system, or going
mm,
through the vaccine schedule, for example, for children, or economics. There's so many areas of our life where we're so conditioned by systems. And I am certainly here as an advocate for people to just get really clear. First of all, awareness is the first step to growth. you
mm,
know
mm.
and so just bringing awareness to what those things are, and then just checking in with yourself, is this actually what I want to exist in?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to ask you, like, obviously it's so important to have the right team around you, as you would know, because you mentioned that you had a doula with you who perhaps brought some energy in that perhaps wasn't
Mm.
aligned to the experience that you wanting to have. How do people go out and find a supportive team, like a doula or a midwife? Like, what is it that you need to go through a home birthing process? What types of people should you be having around you, and how do you find that support?
So this is really, the individual is the one that answers the question for themselves. So they have to know who they are. Introverts may like this sort of support. Extroverts may like this sort of support. Highly sensitive people. If you've had a prior traumatic birth experience, you're going to want more support. If you're a highly sensitive person, you're probably going to want extra emotional support. And so people who have had challenging experiences beforehand, they are probably going to want somebody to give them birth knowledge and support. So whether that's a program like the VBAC program that I've got, or the VBAC home birth program I've got going on, or working with somebody like me one-on-one, and like you, probably working in a coaching capacity where you get that extra support. So I find with those women, when they hire a midwife, a lot of the time, unless they find a midwife who has capacity to give that full plethora of emotional support, what I find with the midwives is that they're there for their medical support. And this again is finding the right person, because you've got to find the right midwife and the right doula. And so what I found with my doula that I hired was, she was very confident. She was very self-assured. And that's what I wanted for my free birth experience, right? I was looking for confidence because I want to feel confident, and I want to know the person attending my birth is going to be confident. But what I was lacking through that experience was, she wasn't a nurturing person, and she wasn't a hold my hand experience. She was a very blunt, this is how it rolls kind of person. That didn't align with my personality. So I needed extra support in emotional capacity to be able to talk about my fears and worries and concerns, because I needed someone who was going to sugarcoat it. And she was not the sugarcoater kind of person. And I find that with the clients that I work with, some of the midwives are the same and some of the doulas are the same. And so really thinking about yourself, what is it that I need and want, and having those conversations with that dream team. The women that I work with might have a midwife and a doula. They might have a massage therapist. They might have, they're obviously working with me because they're my clients. They will have a dream team around them. Now, there are other women who are choosing free birth or home birth off the bat, and because their mothers did it. And so they've got their mother, and their mother did it. A lot of the women I work with, they're the first generation cycle breaker. they tell their mother they're having a home birth or a free birth, and that mother's freaking out. Are you sure you don't want to plan a birth closer to the hospital because it will make me feel better? So you've got to be really protective about who you let into your space, and understanding that just because you really want your mum to become a supportive, open-minded person doesn't mean that she has the capacity or that she's dealt with her past traumas and being able to do that. So when you're finding the right dream team, you really need to look at your situation and understand yourself and what it is that you need, and then go find the right people for your dream team. I call it a dream team because you can legit have your best friend and your husband or your partner, and that is your dream team. Or you can have the full circle support with all the programs, all the bells and whistles. It just depends on your budget and what's your cup of tea.
I love it. And is it like word of mouth? Is there like a website where you can go and there's like a directory of like, here's your massage therapist and here's your doula and here's your midwife and here's your hypnobirther, like, or like, do they come to you? Like, tell us about the process of finding it.
Yeah, so usually your best point of contact is working with somebody like me who can actually direct you to some of the approved, or, we go through a process of getting to know each other. So we're friends with different sorts of people, so we can recommend people, and we already have a gist of who, and I work with women worldwide. So even women I work with in the UK, I can recommend to a group of amazing support people in the UK. And so doulas and that can usually give some help in their local area if you want someone physical. So connecting with your local birth teams, like whether it's a home birth support group, being able to find out who the recommended midwives are or who the recommended doulas, and just being really specific about what it is about you that you're looking for. Like for me, I wanted somebody who was plus size friendly, VBAC friendly, had knowledge about VBAC. I knew that I needed mindset support. I'm working through a lot of fears that were instilled and put onto me. I didn't know if I could actually do it. I trusted in myself, but I had no evidence that I could do those things. And so then the next thing is just meeting with as many people as you can and seeing who actually you vibe with and listening to your intuition.
It's such a big one, isn't it? And having discernment about whether you do or don't want to,
Yeah.
move forward with this person, and obviously creating boundaries, saying yes, saying no.
Mm.
I was going to ask you as well, can you explain a bit about the work that you personally do? Like, what is it that you offer as part of the role within that dream team for women?
Yeah, so I sit in a very different role to a lot of other people because I don't attend the births. So I'm like this third person that can actually give advice, that I don't have a relationship with the midwife or I'm not attending the birth. So I'm not bringing any of the fears that you might instill in me, or you chat to me. So I find with my clients, right, they work with me, but sometimes they don't want to tell their midwife what's actually going on underneath because they don't want to discourage the midwife, to make them think, oh, I've got all these fears. So they love to be able to speak to a third person who's not actually in the birth, to be able to share their deepest, darkest secrets, and then spill a little bit with their birth team and then feel safe that those people have got them covered on the day. We usually go through like birth planning, making sure that you've got the right dream team, so we can talk about personality, temperaments, that sort of thing, making sure you've got the right team around you. And then if something comes up where I feel like a client may need extra support from, a psychologist, or, getting them lactation consultant support or anything like that. But essentially what I do is I work with clients either one-to-one, and I usually work with them throughout their pregnancy to work through their fears, their mindset issues or challenges that come up, and really just as their partner and friend through the journey, because they want to have someone to check in. It's an exciting journey, or it can be an exciting journey. And so being able to be like, oh, I was thinking about this the other night, or I had this dream the other night and I'm really freaking out about it now. Having that person, because often our partners don't get it. The men in our lives, we love them to bits, but they just don't, they're not pregnant, they're not going through the same thing. And then, as I shared, we don't have our mothers usually who have had like a home birth experience, or our best friend. Usually most of those people are hospital birthing. And so having that extra person, I also have programs as well. So those are my lower cost offerings where you can work with me in a group program. I've got my home birth group program, which is a 6-month program where I support you and other mothers in that program. And I'm releasing a VBAC membership called the VBAC Village in 2024, which I'm super excited about because I just want more women to be able to have vaginal births, especially after C-sections. Apparently, only 12% of women will have VBACs after C-section here in Australia, which is abysmal. And I know that more women want to have vaginal births. It's just that they're not given the choices. So I've got a low-cost membership coming in 2024, and I've got my waitlist open for that too. So I'm really excited. But if you want to connect with me, all you have to do is reach out on Instagram and send me a DM, and we'll get started from there. Usually jump on a chat and see where you're at.
Perfect. So we'll link to all of that in the show notes as well. So how people can get in touch with you and obviously your website and everything like that as well. What is some, I guess, magic that you would like to sprinkle out to any of our listeners that are, feeling like whether they're pregnant or whether they're wanting to have babies or going down that path of whether it's free birthing or just, let's just call it empowered birthing. What would you say to them if they're feeling as though, those fears are coming up? What would you say to women out there?
Fears are normal and natural. I was in the pool with my daughter yesterday and we we're talking about fear. And she was telling me about fear of being up high. And I said, you know what? She said, what's your fear, Mum? And I said, I have lots of fears, right? We all have lots of fears. But life is about working through those fears and doing the thing even when we have those fears. So if you're being crippled by fear, then I would recommend reaching out to someone like me to actually work through some of those fears. There could be trauma involved, which is a lot harder to process on your own. But if it's a fear, decide whether you want to keep that fear. Like for me, like the vaginal tearing, right? What am I going to do to try to prevent that at all costs? What can I do? What can I control and what's out of my control? If it's out of my control, there's nothing I can do. I can only make sure that if I tear, I've got the best support team around me. I know what to do. I've got all of these things, but you can't stop the thing from happening most of the time. So you can only prepare yourself. But I remember my GP said to me, I went to her with this horrible story of something that somebody had happened, and it really frightened me. She was in a coma. She said to me, if you worry about it today, will it stop you from worrying about it if it happens? And I said, no. And she said, so why worry about it today? Because you can worry about that in the future if it happens, right? And I was like, yeah, that's good. Because I'm a worrywart. I'm worrying about things that are going to happen in 20 years' time. Why am I wasting my life being fearful about things that could happen, but most of the time don't happen? Or when they do happen, it's not even that bad. And I'm actually big and brave enough to go through it. And I survive everything that comes at me. And I now have a deep trust and belief that I can get through anything. But it certainly helps talking it through with people.
Yes. I love it. Amazing. And Ashley, before we wrap up, I have one final question for you. And to you, what is the meaning of life?
The meaning of life. Well, I really do think that the meaning of life is procreating. It has to be definitely creating life. And I think learning and growing. I do believe that we do come back, or I have come back. I do believe in that. I do think that we're learning. We're on a journey of growth and learning. And so for me, it's just about learning as much as I possibly can and becoming the best version of myself, and always trying to uplift the world as I grow as well. And that's what I feel like I'm doing as well.
I love it. I agree. I absolutely agree. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It's been such an enlightening chat to have. And I know that it's just going to touch the hearts of so many women out there. And for anyone listening, like roar loudly, like get empowered, make decisions based on what it is that you do want. And, obviously for our future generations as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jan.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you love the Enlightened podcast, and the biggest compliment you can give me is subscribing to this podcast, sharing it, and leaving a rating and review. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. My handle is @JenHamiltonOfficial, and the podcast handle is Enlightened_podcast. You can also find the video version on YouTube on my channel. Just search Enlightened and don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a beautiful day and enjoy living the enlightened journey of life.